Now, I would like to give the mic to Jaffar Mirza, who is a PhD candidate at King's College London. His research focuses on Islam in Britain and freedom of religion and belief in Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Minnatwar. I'm thankful to PNM for inviting me to this conference, and congratulations for organizing yet another international conference. So I am a researcher and I focus on freedom of religion and belief in Pakistan and in violence against religious minorities. My PhD focuses on Islam in Britain, where I am documenting the post-1945 Shia history in Britain. I think most people in the room already know about the issues and human rights violations in Pakistan. Almost all ethnic groups are the victim of state violence and repression. Similarly, all religious minorities face discrimination and violence on a daily basis. I sometimes wonder and often fail to understand what exactly the Pakistani state wants. How can a state be so complicit that every other ethnic and religious group is persecuted and unhappy the way things are? Anyway, I don't want to focus on religious and ethnic minorities today. I just want to focus on Balochs and Balochistan. Just a bit of background, I actively started taking an interest in Balochistan human rights violations from 2013 onwards. As I vividly remember, the Balochistan issue was dealt with or seen as a peripheral issue. But it's not peripheral anymore. It has become mainstream, where people across all parts of Pakistan not only know about the issue and the military's role in Balochistan, but also show sympathy with the Balochistan's cause. People here in this room and online know and are the authority on Balochistan. Therefore, my role is here is just an observer, and I will share my reflection on how in the last 10 years the Balochistan movement has emerged as one of the most powerful forces. I agree that the recent events led by different Baloch groups is an uprising, consisting of multiple and diverse movements. Some would call it Baloch Spring. From non-violent human rights-based struggle to militancy, the force and strength we see in the overall Baloch struggle is unprecedented. The consciousness among Baloch and how it's translated publicly is something we haven't seen before. One of the things that made me think about why the Balochistan movement has become so powerful that it's gaining not just local but international attention. Some people would, however, say this, that it's not the first time Balochs are uprising. This would be probably their fourth or fifth uprising. However, the current uprising and its impact is different from previous uprisings. Therefore, the current movement deserves a detailed attention. Since I have very limited time, I will just discuss two interconnected reasons that make the current movement different, powerful, and unique in its own value. First, the flow of information and narrative formation has become democratized now. Previously, the Pakistani state controlled and manipulated the human rights violation and the Baloch question. The state would blame external elements and Baloch tribal leaders for all the things wrong in the region. However, social media has challenged this state's grip on narrative and information control. The Pakistani army, like all of the traditional armies, has been using violence to curb the legitimate concerns of the people. However, this is not the case anymore. Physical violence does not guarantee the control over narrative anymore. The flow of information on social media has brought the Balochistan issue into the limelight. Abductions, killings, and other repressive measures are unable to hide human rights violations. And Pakistan is no exception. All modern states are no more the gatekeeper of information. For example, in the case of Palestine, where the Israeli army, much more sophisticated army, in terms of its technology, is unable to hide facts from the ground, the level of mass killings and humanitarian crisis. As we see, when traditional armies are unable to control narrative, they usually block the sources and medium of information such as internet. The internet coverage in Balochistan has always been limited, but in recent years, where the military is facing challenges from the mainland and all peripheries, it has limited the internet coverage across all regions. These tactics are not new, such as China and India are also examples of this communication repression. China's blockade of news in Xinjiang region or India's blockade of internet in Kashmir
are all identical measures that the Pakistani army is doing. But neither China, nor India, nor Pakistan has been able to prevent the facts coming from these regions and human rights violations. Therefore, the impunity and monopoly over information that the Pakistani army was enjoying is challenged now. The second point I wanted to make is that the current movement involves cross-generational and cross-gender participation, which I think makes the most significant impact. I must say the involvement of young Baloch women is not something new. Baloch student organization has always been the party of young students. Similarly, the likes of Karima Baloch, Farzana Majid, and many others have been active since the 2000s. In fact, these women, particularly the late Shaheed Karima Baloch, are the reasons we see the involvement of young Baloch women in the current movement. When Karima was leading, there were very few women who were the public face. Karima's story and leadership inspired young women who are part of the current movement, who were teenagers when Karima was active, and they grew up seeing Karima mobilizing Baloch families. As a result, we see young women and girls who are leading and have become the face of the movement. The charisma of Mara, Sami, and other Baloch women is so powerful that it has already inspired future generations of Baloch, both in Balochistan and the diaspora. Yesterday, I was watching a clip shared by a Baloch friend where a hardly 7 or 8 year girl was making a speech in a protest in Quetta, and she was saying that she was clear about who oppresses her nation, who abducts her loved ones, and humiliates her family members. She promised that those who humiliate her nation, they will be humiliated. She was referring to the army. I don't see this level of clarity among this age group, but it's quite an often sight in Balochistan, because the young generation has only seen and witnessed the brutal and repressive response from the Pakistani state, which politicized this young generation from the very beginning. I mentioned earlier about diaspora. If one sees a recent protest in London organized by PNM, the presence of women and young girls has significantly increased in recent months, and there is no doubt it's a marring effect. So in a way, it's a global consciousness or uprising that has united different Baloch groups and ensured participation across gender. This is something we haven't seen it before. So coming back to the cross-generational point, the young generation, particularly Gen Z and millennials, are much more tech-savvy, and as a result, possess a greater awareness of narrative making and challenging the mainstream narrative. Baloch Yekjehati movement is a classic example of presenting and framing the Balochistan issue from a global and anti-colonial perspective. Of course, again, this is not something new in Balochistan's case. Balochs and their literature have been presenting the Balochistan issue from an anti-colonial lens. However, the way the timing the current generation utilize is something highly impressive. For example, the use of phrases such as dispossession, occupation, exploitation, climate justice, the way young generation align these terminologies with the global anti-colonial movement made the current movement a part of global discourse. Therefore, you see the likes of Greta Thunberg or other anti-colonial movements show solidarity with Baloch. And credit goes to young Baloch who aligned the Baloch struggle with the global anti-colonial movement. As a result, the human rights violation in Balochistan is not a local issue anymore. It is becoming a part of global discussion, which also reflects the movement is getting its due recognition beyond the South Asian region, which I think one of the greatest achievements the younger generation brought to the movement. So coming to the conclusion, the key question here is, where do the Baloch movement and the Pakistani Federation go from here? I think the majority of us in this room know the crisis Pakistan is in. And the commentators believe that the Pakistan's federation is on the verge of collapse. In fact, some would say the belief in the project or idea of Pakistan is now limited to Sindh and Punjab. A recent BBC News reports claims that Balochistan is no longer in the grip of Pakistan. I'm not an expert on armed insurgencies. Therefore, I don't know how or whether the recently reinvigorated Baloch insurgency poses an essential threat to Pakistan. However, the consciousness of self-determination and doubtful future within Pakistan seems to have become more clear among Balochs. I'm not claiming that every person in Balochistan wants freedom or wants independence. I'm not in Baloch and don't live in Balochistan, therefore I leave this idea of independence to Balochistan. However, there's one thing we can say with absolute certainty, that every person in Balochistan wants freedom, justice, and dignity. These things have been, all these things have been deprived of all these things for the last 70 years. Pakistan can't continue denying fundamental rights to Baloch. Suppressing Baloch voice had never worked before and will never work in the future. If anything history teaches, the state persecution makes Baloch more resilient. I would end with Urdu poetry and wanted to remind the Pakistani state, who would have thought that killing Karima Baloch would silence Baloch, but they didn't know that dozens of Karima had already born in Balochistan. कि रात जब किसी खुर्शीद को शहीद करे, तो सुबह एक नया सूरज तराश लाती है. I can't do the literal translation, but the contextual translation is, no matter the scale of violence and oppressions, Baloch will rise every other day. Thank you.